Survivor Specialists John and McKenna are back, and we are so excited to rewind this episode of 46 and talk about some past moments that this episode reminds us of. John, the finale, it's our last rewind of the season.
Thoughts? It is. You know what? I've really enjoyed this season. I mean, I obviously, McKenna, you and I have been talking about how much we've enjoyed this season throughout it so far, but this finale kind of puts a nice little cap on it. It wasn't the most eventful finale we have had, but it delivered, I think, a very fulfilling conclusion. Whether you agree Kenzie should have won or Charlie should have won, like whatever you think out there, it's a very fitting conclusion for this entire season, in my opinion. I've had such a joy talking about season 46. And as a whole, like, the episode kind of got broken down into 3 chunks, as finales usually do. And they were kind of like...
Outwit, play out last?
Somewhat. Maybe a little bit. But they were of varying... I don't know how to say it. I guess varying, like, levels of enjoyment for me. First section was quite entertaining until we got to that first tribal council. The second section was really exhilarating going through the challenge, and then the bit leading up to Firemaking was a little okay. I'm kind of over this. And then final tribal council did not disappoint.
Yeah, exactly. I'm ready and excited to break this episode down.
Absolutely. And as Bar6578 says here, there was drama with the vote in the end, and that's all you can really ask for. In the end, we're watching reality TV. If we're not having drama in addition to gameplay, what's the point?
What's the point? You're right. So let's get into our outwit moment. For the season, we're talking fire-making choices. So who do you take with you? Do you give up your necklace? Do you who do you send to fire? Like, all that encompasses a fire-making decision here at 4.
Yeah, obviously in older seasons there was the decision as to whether or not you force fire for someone can convince someone to force fire. But when Heroes, Healers, and Hustlers introduced the concept of forced fire making, it really changed the way you have to approach the end game. We see that a lot here, and I mean, there's always a lot of discussion with, especially in the new era, where we see the person going home in 5th tends to be that biggest threat.
Typically, that was 4th.
Typically, that was 4th. It even used to be 3rd once upon a time, back when there were final 2s left. But because of that, firemaking just changed the way the game has to be played. And we've seen every single iteration of firemaking possible. You win and you put the big threat in there to get beaten by someone who you think can beat them. You have put the 2 weaker threats in there and just take one of them. You have 2 big threats, so one of them takes the other out. You have put yourself in, so you take out the big threat. You have put yourself in, so you don't take out the big threat. There are so many different iterations of fire making, and it's so pivotal to the end game. And we have seen so many people, even in this episode, right, where people have put so much credence into fire making, and whether or not it really should be something you value at the end of the game, how someone approaches fire making. Personally, I'm not of the opinion that it really matters. I probably wouldn't base someone's game off it myself, but I understand in the moment on the island, you can make that decision. But I even said it to you, McKenna, when we were planning this episode. I kind of just don't want to win Final 4 immunity at this point and make that decision.
No, I would never want to win Final 4 immunity because, yeah, you're right. I don't want to put someone into fire making. I don't want to deal with the stress that Ben had to deal with Charlie and Kenzie, 2 people he cares deeply about. And then it's just an interesting a way to go about the Final Four when there's not a real vote. I don't think we should have fire making anymore, but I feel like it's dull. It's not dull, but it's like the spark has diminished because we have gotten every win. Okay, you get it. Pun not intended. But we've gotten every winner, right? We've gotten the winner of fire making. We've gotten the person that gets taken along. We've gotten we've gotten all iterations of winners. Someone who threw themselves into fire making. So what else is there for this fire making to give us? And I don't think it necessarily hurts your game or helps your game. I think it depends on the jury and depends on the season, where I don't think, well, apparently fire making did help Kenzie via Maria, but like I don't think it helps or hurts you. Because if Ben were to do fire making himself and throw himself in, that's not helping really his resume, because people are like, well, you just did that at the last minute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I mean, we saw that with Heidi in 44, right? Where Heidi puts herself in, and despite beating the fire making record, didn't matter in that season. But other seasons where fire making has been that like defining factor. Obviously, we have Edge of Extinction, where Chris Underwood had to put himself in fire making because that's what the jury told him he had to do. And we have,
or your moment,
or my moment, Winners at War, because I think Winners at War is one of these perfect moments where, again, knowing the jury and what they expect out of fire making is really important to knowing how to make this decision. And Natalie was given the roadmap on how to approach this final section of the game in order to win the game. Everyone at Edge of Extinction knew, okay, you have to put yourself in on fire making and take out Tony. That's how you win the game here. And Natalie elects not to do that. Had Sarah and Tony go after each other, which honestly, in maybe any other season, is the correct thing to do in that moment.
But not when the jury is telling you, this is how you get our votes.
Exactly. And that's the hardest thing with fire making. And again, it comes into this idea of like, Natalie does the safe thing. And we actually we talk about the Fiji finale over on the Patreon, and Dreams with the car deal decision does the safe thing, ensuring himself to final tribal council. Natalie does that here, right? Elects to keep immunity, not go into fire making, and get to the final tribal council, because you can't win the game if you're not sitting at the end of it.
Correct. But you can't win the game if you don't do what the jury exactly tells you. So what does it matter going out at fourth or going out third or second? Like, yes, okay, a few $1,000s. Okay, I get it. But she also won $1 million. Okay, but she also won $1 million already. Like, I don't know. But I feel like if it's risk versus reward, right? I feel like the risk is better to throw yourself in fire making to win the $1 million versus like the small reward of inching yourself to second.
Right, but I think like on top of that, with the Natalie decision, it clearly wasn't the criteria for everyone on Edge of Extinction, because Natalie still manages to get votes in Final Tribal Council. And like enough votes that people were concerned about giving Michelle votes as like a second place finisher. So it's an interesting take on it, where this is one of two situations we have had with forced fire making, where the person who happens to win the immunity and gets to make the decision with forced fire making is the person who comes back from Edge of Extinction and actually has the roadmap they need to follow.
Yeah.
So I don't completely fault Natalie for not going for it here. However, if that's what the jury is telling you to do, you have to do it, because in the end, and I think this is a really important thing to talk about, especially with 46 and what Charlie says in the after show, right? The jury's never wrong. The jury always picks the right winner. And because of that, knowing the jury is one of the most underappreciated skills in Survivor.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Oh, okay. So John is dying. So I'll take over and talk about my moment here. And I'm actually going to talk Island of the Idols here. We have not talked about this all season, but I was like, you know what? We've got to talk about all 40 seasons pre-New Era. So I'm hitting you with Island of the Idols right here, and how Tommy navigates this final for Firemaking, where he puts into Nora's head way before that he sucks at firemaking. I suck at firemaking. I can't make a fire. And he's like didn't make a fire all season, so nobody really saw him making fire. But really he can make a fire. So it kind of reminds me of Charlie this season, where he's like, I don't need it and I don't really want it. So I'm just gonna keep steady and hope that I get chosen and not have to do firemaking. Like I can, and I'll win, but still I don't need that move for my resume.
I don't think going into firemaking here would have helped Charlie's game in the end.
But it might, well, I guess.
I don't think it would.
We don't know what's going on, and we don't know what's going on in Maria's head, but so what she says is Kenzie winning fire and that determination was one of the reasons that swayed her vote, along with what Q said, Q's question. So
right,
but
she was also one of the people who didn't put up her hand when Jeff asked, did you change your mind at Final Tribal Council?
Because of the firemaking.
Right, supposedly.
So if it's not there, then who knows?
Right, but I think like
I don't think it could have hurt Charlie to go in.
No, I don't think. Well, I mean, there's the potential Liz beats him with firemaking, but the funniest moment of this entire finale to me is Ben coming over to Charlie being like, how comfortable are you making fire? He's like, you know what? I'm not feeling great, as he has like a bunch of fires burning around him that he just
Yeah. And basically that's kind of what Tommy did all season. And then we got to the final four and Nora's just like, all right, Lauren, you're my best friend. You're going in. Dean, we had a nice little date. You're going in. And then Tommy now is safe and is not going into firemaking, but he turns Nora's like power into his own power and helps Dean with fire and gives him tips for fire. So like, I don't think we have ever and kind of will ever see someone shift the power kind of almost away from the immunity winner, where like they're handing, the win to someone in firemaking and making their ideal final three.
Yeah, and the most impressive thing about the way Tommy handles it is how he handles it afterwards in Final Tribal Council and how he addresses it to the jury, where he's like, no, I can make fire. Of course I can make fire.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like advantageous for me to be in this position. Like there's no point in me being in this position. So why would I volunteer that information? Charlie didn't take advantage of that in 46. He didn't say, I leveraged my social bond with Ben to make it so that I didn't have to do fire, right? Like it's a different approach to the game where it feels like he's trying to go the Tommy route here, but he's pulling a half measure with it.
Yeah, I agree. It wasn't the full Tommy.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, are you ready to move into our outplay moment?
Yeah. Let's move along, because I know we're kind of jumping around the finale, and that's just the way finales work. There are moments all over the place that we're going to talk about, but this is really fun because I think it really talks about an interesting subset of challenges that we ended up with in this finale.
So we are talking about helping people during a challenge, and that's what the thumbnail is all about. This for the final episode here, we were like, more the merrier. Let's bring them on the thumbnail here.
So McKenna, this is the first time we really had an opportunity to talk about these challenges. Let's just talk about this first immunity challenge for a moment. How did you feel about it?
I loved it. I thought it was great, but now it was a little bit broken. Where I think you definitely need to either say, you know, you can only take your plank and every plank has a different amount of holes. You can like, you can't help. There has to be maybe some boundaries so it's an even playing field. But I don't fault Liz and Kenzie for working together because no one said that they couldn't.
Yeah, it's one of those loopholes you find in a challenge, right? Like, better to beg for forgiveness than ask for permission.
Because I really loved the puzzle where it was like, all right, count, like you did the puzzle and then you had like another aspect to it. So like count the amount of bats and puzzle pieces and then the holes on the plank. And that was just oh crap, they've got to go all the way back after dealing with this puzzle and the rest of the course. They've got to go all the way back through it, now bring a plank. Like, that's insane. But I thought that was such an amazing twist to it. But it sucked that like I wanted to see it play out how it was intended. That's I think that was really what I was missing, is like I wanted to see it play out as it was intended and not like cut short.
Yeah, I mean, but for most of it, I don't think this challenge was going to go much longer because Maria.
No, I know. I don't mean cut short that way, but like I wanted to see like, I don't know, that individual win.
Yeah, I mean, the question here, I think, that really needs to be addressed when it comes to Liz helping Kenzie, because this is definitely an indictment to Kenzie's social game, in my opinion. The fact that, like, you know, she was able to enlist Liz, not even by asking her to do it, but that Liz is willing to do it. It's a discussion about like the physical game and how much of a threat you can really emerge with. So it's a lesson in like threat management to a sense. Does it feel kind of lame? Sure. It also made us for like the lamest tribal council of this finale because it was so predictable. But at the same time, I really do think this is kind of part of Survivor in general. And it's funny because we have these instances where, you know, it's allowed, it's not allowed, so there is no steadfast rule. And I think that's more where my complaint about it comes from, is when is this okay and when is it not okay? What is it in the Survivor rule book?
Yeah.
But I don't see a problem with people helping each other out. It's the same as someone standing there and telling them how to solve a puzzle.
Yeah,
right?
I get it. I get it. And I understand it. It's just like, I wish also I had Maria on my draft team. There was a little like heart moment there for me where I was like, Maria, no, because like she would have won the challenge. But anywho, let's get to my moment, and that's where you can't help someone. And Jeff calls it outright, saying you can't. But it's also very similar to what happens here. Is South Pacific. They all want to beat Ozzy. Ozzy is their Maria. And Sophie is doing rather well, but then part of her stack falls and she needs the rest of her domino blocks. And she's like, all right, Albert, you're sucking. Drop your stack and help me out and gather up my dominoes so I can win and beat Ozzy. But Jeff is like, no, that's not how this challenge works. But I feel like it could be the way that this challenge works. Like, there's no where, like you were saying, where's the line?
Yeah, and unfortunately, it comes from an era where there was kind of a lot of like production played favorites in the 20s. And Ozzy, as a returning player on this season, was a favorite. And
Sophie was not.
Yeah, and the story's there, right? Like, oh my God, Ozzy came back and won all the immunities that he had to. It's like the Chris Underwood story that they wanted out of Redemption Island, but they didn't get it until Edge of Extinction, and it wasn't one of the returning players. So it's an interesting situation. I know there's been a lot of discussion online of kind of parsing the differences between the South Pacific incident and what we see in the 46 finale, where it's like, okay, but that's like actually helping her the entire time rather than like just going
picking
back
up her
and picking something up. Yeah, it's a lot more involved than what Liz did.
Yeah, they did the combo lock together, basically.
Yeah,
Because
it's just,
Liz
again,
also counted the number of holes. Like, she didn't just grab
yeah,
Kenzie's plank and continue on with her puzzle.
yeah. And like, again, like that's where the question becomes: how much are you allowed to help? Yes, what is it? Rowan Rolo here says like it's individual immunity, not plus a friend.
Mm-hmm.
I get that, but part of Survivor is making friends, and like that's the question of like, well, is this still Survivor at this point if someone's helping someone else?
I
And
feel like
clearly,
also, just wait for Maria to come back with the plank and see what she puts in or something like that. Or like count Maria's, plank holes, because then you already have your numbers. She still has to count the bats and the whatever and the puzzle pieces. As long as you're able to count the holes on Maria's board, then you can just keep going. Also, it wouldn't be that hard because it was 35 to just move the numbers and pull.
yeah, that's true.
To
It's
just
true.
get.
I wonder if there is a rule about that. Sometimes we see that in different competition shows where it's like you can't just like try another combination. We've seen it in Survivor, right? In some of like the counting challenges where they're like the counting challenge in Talking On, right? They get the number wrong, they have to go back to one of the stations and count again.
Yeah.
So maybe that was a rule. It wasn't very clearly shown to us, but that's fine. We don't need them talking about the semantics of the challenge to us, the audience.
I mean, for me, I'm not a runner, so running to go and grab this plank would be insane to me. So I would at least know there's probably more than 20. So I'd start at like 21, go through that, and then wind up at 35 rather quickly.
I'm going to be honest, and this is just the way my brain works. If I'm untying, because of the way that plank was used in the challenge, where it's tied up and you're like pulling the rope through holes, I probably would have been counting the entire time.
I would not have. I would have just been like one track mind.
But that is my one track mind. My one track mind is okay. I got this one, 2, 3, and like that's just how my mind works sometimes. Guarantee you, people on 49 and maybe 50 will be counting a lot more things in challenges moving forward.
Yeah. All right, John, now let's move over to your moment, which has a bunch of similarities to the finale of 46.
Before we do move on to it, I do just want to mention there's one thing I really, really liked about this challenge. That's it ended with it hitting a gong. and because like we have a gong in a few different challenges in Survivor history, but the fact that this immunity challenge ends with a gong, do you remember what started with a gong?
I mean, probably
China? Every tribal council in Borneo.
Oh yeah, that's right.
As they enter and they hit the gong, so I like that. I like that little bit of callback to the past, even if Survivor didn't intentionally do it. I enjoy that.
Okay.
As someone who talks about Survivor in the past every week.
Yeah, I feel like that one was a little bit of a stretch, but I'll give it to you.
Anywho, so
because it made you mention Borneo.
So the other moment that we want to talk surprisingly relates to the second immunity challenge in 46, and that's the moment in Millennials versus Gen X where Adam elects in a similar puzzle to the second immunity challenge. It's not as grandiose, it's not on such a big scale, but they have a ball heading down a track, and then if they miss it and it goes into the metal track, they have to wait the timer out and then throw it back up and like keep it going. And in order to make David Wright lose, Adam completely neglects his puzzle and then just helps Ken.
Yeah, exactly.
Like tell him when the ball's falling so that Ken knows when to go back.
So this is like sort of okay, but like sort of better for me because Adam is just being a timer rather than physically helping Ken, but then it also means that Ken never messes up. So like I don't know what the level of okayness it is. They're like slightly different, but it's still very much helping, because as we see in 46, that time is crucial.
Yeah, I wonder if it's more fair in this instance. I think it's kind of, again, you're sacrificing your own chances at immunity, which I think is a strategic plan in Survivor.
Mhm.
So, so it's really hard to determine like where's the line. I think in this instance, Adam should have kept putting his own ball up every time it hits the end of the timer.
Yeah, that's true.
Like
Yeah.
I think like he has to still be actively participating in the challenge somehow. And maybe that's what it comes down to with the Liz of it all too. Maybe the problem is Liz stopped solving her puzzle
Mhm.
and isn't participating. So maybe that's where the line should be drawn. They have to continue participating in the challenge somehow and progressing themselves. I think of
Mhm.
like I play competitive card games, and a lot of the rules in those games is like the idea of like slow play is something that gets punished because it can be uh, very detrimental to your opponents and very beneficial to yourself sometimes. So it um, it's kind of like that where you always have to be progressing the game state.
Yeah,
And
I feel
maybe
like
that's what
that's
production
the
needs to
rule.
say when it comes to these immunity challenges. You always need to be progressing the game state. Like it's
Mhm.
cool if you're helping someone, but you also have to be working on your own thing at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. Let's call Jeff on the Jeff phone and see what he thinks about that.
Yeah.
um Alrighty. Ready to go on to Outlast?
Yeah, let's talk Outlast. Let's talk the jury.
All right, Outlast, we're talking jury questions. We don't have super specific moments here, but we kind of want to deep dive the three jury formats that we've seen in Survivor. We have the old school format, which is just, a jury member stands up, asks a question, and then goes, sits back down, rinse and repeat. Then you have the newer format, which was Jeff kind of moving everything along with Outwit, Outplay, and Outlast. And now we have this hybrid of the two in the new era where it's like, all right, we're gonna just sit here and like talk and ask questions, but Jeff's not forming it into Outwit, Outplay, and Outlast. It's just kind of the jury having a discourse with each other and the castaways.
Yeah. So McKenna, why don't you start us off with the original jury format?
Yeah. So I think I don't know which I prefer. It's not the Outwit, Outplay, Outlast form. It's definitely between the old format and this newer one, because it allows for individuals to ask questions, like more pointed, like what they want to know questions. So the old format, in my opinion, lends to more like impactful moments and memorable, where you have tribal councils like Gabon, Fiji, the one we're watching on the Patreon, I feel like is like infamous for crazy jury questions. And then you have like Sue with the rats, the snakes and the rats. So like
Mm.
these are all like very impactful survivor moments that all derive from this old school jury. I'm just going to sit here and talk to you. I have 10 minutes to be able to talk to you and ask my questions.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things about these questions is they were also approved by production. Like that's kind of an
Mhm.
important part about this original thing is the entire jury was like, okay, what question do you want to ask? Do we approve it? Do we not approve it? Is this too harsh? Sometimes, you know what, it might be hard to believe that they didn't say some things were too harsh because it was there are some moments in some very particular final tribal councils that some might deem as going much too far. Uh,
Corinne.
Corinne in Gabon, half of the jury in Fiji.
Yeah. So I feel like it also lends more toward like, bitter jurors and like soliloquies and just going on this like power trip as well, rather than like just genuinely getting a question answered, which I feel like that's why the new era tribal council is good because the jury is still asking these pointed questions, but it's not out of malice.
Yeah, but I mean, on the flip side of that, we don't get the grandstanding that we got in some previous, like the old jury or the old format for jury questions, like Eric Cardona, right? And Samoa, like just going up there and standing Natalie. Is it impactful? I don't know. Sometimes though, maybe the jury just needs that reality check, especially if they are going in a little too hard. I think it would have been nice if there was some sort of, again, like we covered Fiji for the Patreon, so it's on the mind right now. If there's someone at the end of that jury segment was like, "Hey guys, let's not be total assholes to everyone in this jury, and like just like think about actually their game and not just whether or not we like them as a human being."
Yeah.
Like it could have just it's a nice moment. Do we get that in the new format that we've been seeing? I don't know. It's the new format is so weird because we still have Jeff individually asking questions, and I'm not sure at this point, and maybe like next time we talk to someone from the new era, we should ask them if they're told, okay, you're going to get one question at Final Tribal Council, and they still have to get it approved by production, or if it is really just like sit down, have a conversation, and kind of this open forum discussion that we end up seeing in the edit.
Then, we have the new format, but it's not new era, where, it's the outwit, outplay, outlast. And I feel like it leans more, even harder for championing people. Like, Game Changers comes to mind, where you have Ozzy championing Brad and Zeke championing Sarah when it hits certain segments. So like the outplay portion, obviously Ozzy's going to be like, Brad won 4 individual immunities. And that's insane. He should win because of this, because that lends to my game style of gameplay, where, I feel like we see a little bit more championing arising with the new format rather than the old school format. The old school format, I feel like it's more like talking to the jury and is like, you should vote for this, like in like analogies. It's never like vote for this person. It's like snake and the rat.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things now that I'm thinking about it, the old jury format feels more like a courtroom, right? I mean, not just because like a jury's involved, but because it's one-on-one, it's one at a time.
Yeah.
They come up, ask questions, do their investigation, and then there's a cross investigation afterwards based on responses and things like that, right? Whereas this open forum format, I just didn't feel structured enough when it was introduced in Game Changers. And the other problem with it is they're using like these 3 pillars of Survivor: outwit, outplay, outlast. It's kind of funny that you and I now use it as the pillars for the rewind, but I hope you can agree with me. And one thing the rewind has really shown us over this season, what outwit, outplay, and outlast are really blurry sometimes, and what falls into those categories isn't as defined as Survivor might have thought they were going into that first open forum in Game Changers. Outplay definitely seems like it should be the one that's focusing on the physical game, and of course Jeff does preface things or like kind of explain what they all mean, right? But if I'm thinking outlast, how did any of the final 3 outlast one another? They all are sitting there at the end of the game. The people they outlasted are the jury. So it's just, it doesn't really make sense as a thing to like base the game on at that point. So this open forum, it really made things weird. And like you said, it led to singular people in the juries being more vocal. And like that's the big difference, I think, between even the new era, where we didn't see too much of people controlling, but like Tiffany was kind of a foreman of the jury on 40 on this in this 46 finale, right? Like especially with like the timer incident and things like that. So it feels like that old format benefited people more because the more verbose and the larger than life personalities weren't just taking everything over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. I feel like I am now at a point where I don't need the old format.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like satisfied with how Final Tribal Council runs in the new era with the new new era format, because it's that like middle ground between those two where we don't get as much championing, we don't get as much like assholeness. Like it's that like sweet spot where obviously we probably don't see all of the questions being asked. So it was a little tiff heavy because that's the edit. But I feel like it lends a little bit more toward, if you want to speak, you can. If you want to just listen and take in what Final Tribal Council is, that's fine too. Some people need more explanation than others. So I think it really like blends everything together. Like Lacey, I don't think she like like none of her questions were good information to like produce a winner. And I think she should have just had this new era tribal council format where she could just blend in and listen and not have to ask a question.
Yeah, and I think like the big thing here is having the direction of Jeff helps keep things going. And granted, you made a very good point, McKenna. This is an edit. We are seeing an edited show. Final Tribal Councils are multiple hours long, and we are seeing like 20 minutes to half an hour of them. So we have to take everything with a grain of salt. It's possible Jeff did kind of mediate these the new jury format when it was introduced in Game Changers through 40, right? Like maybe there was a bit more mediation. Maybe there wasn't. Maybe production was just like, have at her, go for it. But having Jeff as a mediator, and that's all he's really doing. He's not interjecting. He's not providing any commentary on what's going on. He's just simply saying, okay, Liz, it's your turn to ask a question.
Yeah.
And I think that's enough. I think it is like kind of this happy medium between these formats. I do like having, again, like you said, the open conversation. There are times when it gets a little out of hand, like with
Q,
and
Tiff,
Tiffany.
and Kenzie. Yeah. But
like
then it got reined in and it was like, forget you, Q. We're just going to keep
it's nice not having the jury be like, oh, you can respond to what's happening in the moment, right? Like, and that's what the benefits of the old format were, was that the finalists themselves can say things.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if a single jury or a single juror is completely out in left field and has no idea what actually was going on and is trying to present facts in a way where it's not the truth, it's nice in this format that the finalists can have that person to confirm or deny what the truth is on the jury.
Yeah, exactly. So I am definitely pro new era format. Just don't go back to the new format. Because it's not necessarily a new school, because it only happened in a certain chunk of seasons. But the outwit, outplay, outlast format. Any last words, John, on the finale of 46?
Overall, I really enjoyed this season. Probably my second favorite of the new era. I'm going to have to rewatch the new era in general to get a better idea of how they all rank. But overall, I'm happy watching Survivor. And that's just what it comes down to. How did you end up feeling about this? Where is it falling in your new era rankings?
Second to third. I again would have to see the seasons again, or just like remember everything that happened in each season, because as everyone experiences the blur of the 40s. So it's definitely a good one. And I'm excited to see what's next. But though Survivor is coming to a close, and that's like the bread and butter over here on The Specialist, we still got some things happening this summer. And John, do you know things that are happening in the Specialist universe?
I know a few things. If you haven't checked out the recap from Wednesday with Phil and Will, do that. Some of the winners of our fantasy games are revealed there. Some of them are revealed in the Digging Deeper that Phil and Blake did yesterday, which was also a very interesting conversation. This is kind of it for Survivor coverage for a little while. Phil and I still have the Cinema Specialist happening. Yesterday, we talked about I'm Not There and Rocket Man, which is very interesting, just talking about music biopics in general. Next week, we're talking about Badass Women in film, and we're talking Aliens and Edge of Tomorrow. So those will be interesting. Then we're taking a bit of a break in June before getting back into finish our Phase 5 wash of the MCU in the lead up to Deadpool and Wolverine coming out. And then Phil,
we got a lot going on the Patreon.
The Patreon is going to be the place to be this summer. Phil and Will are going to be starting to go through Australian Survivor, which should be really exciting in anticipation for this supposed Australian versus America season coming up. And then stay tuned to the main channel because you're going to be seeing a lot more of McKenna because you and Blake are going to be covering Big Brother this summer.
Oh, yes. Blake and I coming at you all summer long to talk Big Brother, and boy, am I so excited.
So, and then we also still have everything over on the Patreon. There's still $5 Tuesdays for the movies. I believe Amazon's starting up soon. We're done Thailand on Every Season Matters, and Amazon kicks off soon. So that's going to be really exciting to pay attention to. And of course, we always have the casting perspective and the Q&A, everything there. Access to the Discord. People will be talking all summer, I am sure. Lots of conversation happening there all the time. So make sure to check it out. The link is...
And make sure to follow on all socials, because that's where a lot of things are going to be announced as well. So as things are up in the air and start airing, it will all be announced on socials. But until then, until next season, this is it for the Rewind, and we will see you later. Goodbye.